Shoulder to shoulder stood native Hawaiians, Japanese, Filipino, Portuguese, and Chinese American descendants of plantation workers, descendants of American missionaries, and transplants from North America who have been calling Hawaii home for as long as 40 years and as short as 6 months. Lawyers, musicians, small farmers, students, doctors, college professors, politicians, writers, New Age haoles, woodworkers, social workers, nurses, mechanics, architects. Every part of Kauai's community was represented. The coup de grace came from a few dozen surfers who suddenly leaped from the jetty's rocky edge to paddle out toward the mouth of Nauwiliwili Harbor. Most were kids. There they sat, straddling their boards, looking as small as mice in comparison to the skyscraper-high ship, yet they blocked it from moving forward, a sort of Tiananmen Square challenge in the waters of Kauai. It was dangerous. They went right up under the bow of the mammoth boat. Then dozens more swimmers jumped into the water, some with boogie boards, and headed out toward the ship, despite the strident warnings from officials in Coast Guard and police boats. No one was killed, but they could have been. As for the rest of us, we lined the dock, many hoisting signs and shouting, "Go home!" and "EIS first!" Afterward, a passenger on the super ferry, when interviewed by a Honolulu TV station, said that when she saw the crowd waiting on the pier, she mistook it for a welcoming party of natives, the kind mythologized in the early days of Hawaii tourism. Only when she was in earshot of the angry slogans did she realize she was on a ship headed for trouble. Until that moment, that passenger from Honolulu had had no idea whatsoever of the concerns and growing anger and resistance to the ship that had been rising up on the outer islands of Kauai, Maui, and the Big Island. We on Kauai had been pushing petitions, writing letters, filing lawsuits, and testifying to the legislature demanding in EIS a full report on how this alien vessel would impact our already environmentally stressed island. But to state officials, we seemed not to exist. We were equally invisible to an Oahu-centric media. Our voices had been effectively silenced. The rest of the archipelago knew nothing of our discontent, and we knew little of theirs until the Kauai protests. When the community turned out to block the boat, our protest was briefly covered by the North American media, including the New York Times and Los Angeles Times, with a degree of admiration. But the local press remained disdainful and sloppy. One oft-broadcast video clip claiming to show quote-unquote violent protesters pounding on the hood of an SUV that had just disembarked the super ferry was both humiliating and infuriating to us. And wrong. Actually, the people slamming the car were trying to draw the driver's attention to a man who, in an act of nonviolent resistance, lay down in the path of the vehicle's front tires. This was never revealed by the mainstream media. Kip Goodwin, an eyewitness, later described it. And then he says, "When someone opened the gate to let cars off the super ferry, the first vehicle out, an SUV, was faced with a crowd of protesters. The driver, who was tensely chewing gum and at seemingly a mile a minute, nosed forward, his white knuckles gripping the steering wheel, while a man lay down on the pavement in front of the tires, prompting hysteria and yelling. Some protesters surrounded the vehicle, shouting warnings to the driver about the man only 3 feet in front, but the noise was too loud to hear anything. Others grabbed the man on the ground and pulled him to safety. Trying to get the driver's attention, a woman battered her paper poster at the windshield, and a man slapped on the hood with his hands. It was hardly violent, but it became the prevalent television encapsulation of the event, repeated on news shows for weeks, as if it were the World Trade Center Twin Towers tumbling down. The super ferry did eventually dock that night, but before it could, it had to hover on the ocean horizon for 2 hours while a tense standoff took place between surfers and Coast Guard boats festooned with M16 rifles. Finally, the Coast Guard managed to herd away the surfers like goats, clearing a path for the ship to enter. The passengers waited late into the night for the angry crowd to disperse, persuaded by SWAT teams. The weary travelers finally disembarked around 9 in the evening. As the ship slunk away into the distance, a shooting star arced green through the sky, fizzling to nothing just above the harbor. The Hawaiians cheered, "Ho'ailona," a good omen. So that's the first section of chapter 3. Thanks so much, Chris. And now I'd like to turn to my co-author, Jerry Mander, who has an illustrious history writing many books about environmentalism, indigenous issues, and was also instrumental in doing the publicity work for the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana and other native rights issues back in the 70s. So, Jerry?
Thank you. What she didn't read was that the next day was the day that the people jumped into the water and the boat didn't come back.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Right.
And,
thank you.
And made a very, very powerful statement which kept the boat out ever since. Well, thank you so much for coming, and I'm very happy to be here also. I'm not a resident of Hawaii, but this issue became very important to me when Kuhan explained to me what was happening. And I really saw it not only as a very crucial local issue, but also a global issue. And I'm going to read something very, very short from the very beginning of the book to help you see the way I began to see this issue and how its larger importance, the local importance, of course, is crucial. What's most important is for people to be able to take control of their own communities and take control of their own environment and protect their own resources and make their own decisions about what kinds of things are impacting their community. But in this case, there were global issues involved as well. So let me read just a short thing from the very start. I'm one of few contributors to this book who does not live in Hawaii, though I've spent a great deal of time there over this last several decades. Being on the mainland, however, provides me the chance to see how the rest of the country reacts to events in our 50th state, with a blank stare. Recently, for example, I was in New York at a party at the home of a very well-known literary agent. I saw old colleagues and friends there. One of them greeted me this way: "Hey Jerry, what are you working on these days? We haven't seen a book from you in a long while." "Actually, I'm working on a book now about the Hawaii Super Ferry." Blank stare. "What did you say? Hawaii what?" "Hawaii Super Ferry. I guess you haven't heard about it. It's this gigantic, high-speed aluminum ferry boat, and they've started running it between the islands there. It's such a scam, and lots of people are furious. There are really big protests." "But ferries are good, no? People don't have to get on planes. That's a good thing." "Well, yes, I really love ferries too, but not this one. It runs 40 miles an hour in shallow water with these big catamaran blades, slicing through zones teeming with whales and turtles, and the company will not slow it down. It's an environmental nightmare, and it also carries hundreds of cars out to these little islands that are choking from traffic already, and it moves all kinds of bad bugs and animals like mongoose that eat up everything in sight. And anyway, it's owned by this really scary New York military finance guy, John F. Lehman, one of the most aggressive right-wing neocon war promoter militarists who worked for Nixon and Reagan and now John McCain. Are airlines run by nicer people? Well, no, maybe not, but look, there's all this weird scheming and double dealing going on, including outrageous legal manipulations by the governor, who's got her eye on national office. And Senator Inouye is involved. And it looks like it all may really be about a big military build-up of these kinds of boats in the Pacific to get ready for possible future battles with China, about who dominates the coastlines of Asia. People need to know about all that. It needs to be explained. Jerry, for Christ's sakes, you sound like some kind of paranoid coffeehouse anti-military freak, like Dennis Kucinich or Chomsky or Ellsberg or somebody. Yes, well, they'd probably get the idea right away. Maybe I should tell them. Come on, Jerry, it's Hawaii. It's all about vacations and condo timeshares. Who cares?